Absolutely. I think just paging through a few of these, again, just because our industry changes so quickly that it's easy for us to get amnesia about the past, because something that happened 2 years ago was an eternity in the solar world. But REC does have a very strong track record, project supply into these spaces. And if we look at the first slide beyond this, this is, of course, not detailing all of them, but just ones that sort of have an interesting story. There was a portfolio with a developer called Recurrent Energy that was in total about 350 megawatts. One of those was the largest individual utility project that REC had supplied globally, which was 257 megawatts. That was in California's Central Valley. This is your typical non-recourse financed utility off-taker. This project, public information, ended up being majority owned by Southern Company after COD. But the fascinating aspect there is that Recurrent Energy was an independent developer at that time. They're, of course, now owned by Canadian Solar, who's one of our competitors. And that transaction happened between when we contracted for supply and when we supplied the material. So by the time we supplied those projects, they were actually owned by one of our competitors, which is fine. We're all friends. That's great. We're all doing different things. But that hadn't happened to me personally before. But that decision was made in 2015 because REC was a relative safe harbor in the supply landscape. That was in the wake of the second AD/CVD case, which completely upended the supply outlook for solar modules imported, similar to what we're seeing today. And REC was in a position with Singapore production where we could offer certainty. That was fantastic. The Georgia Power military-based portfolio, those were all of a similar DNA, which is those were U.S. government entity PPA off-takers, with the actual solar asset being owned by Georgia Power, which is a Southern Company utility. That project supply spanned in time from 2016 all the way to 2020. The final one in 2020 was Robins Air Force Base, which is known as the quote-unquote largest industrial complex in the whole state of Georgia. It's like a small city in and of itself. That was 175 megawatts. And those procurements were driven by, that was Buy American Act, but was able to be exempted by the contracting officer by TAA, the Trade Agreements Act. So Singapore, of course, having a close trade relationship with the U.S. that was underpinned by the U.S.-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, it was an easy thumbs up for them to give. You look at nations like Vietnam, China, et cetera, those are countries that are not considered friendlies under the Trade Agreements Act list. I like also the Oakleaf portfolio this was right around the rise of community solar projects, so mid-2010s into late 2010s. And this was in total 24 megawatts, but split across 2 megawatt sites that were flung all the way across the state, with a major mobilization effort for the EPC efforts from McCarthy. So to get the right materials in the right place at the right time to keep those guys humming was a major victory for our logistics team. That's something that they're very, very good at. I think we can page through a couple of these following ones. The intent here is not to show every single project we've ever supplied, but simply to refresh the market's knowledge and the industry's knowledge that, hey, REC is back in the non-residential space, but this isn't the first time. We're very fluent with these deal structures, with the requirements that can be significantly different than Resi. The Costco and IKEA portfolios were similar in the sense that those were both cash purchases of solar systems by those entities. And what was at the foremost and the forefront of that decision-making process was a reputable product from a reputable company that had a degree of social responsibility, because those things are very important to both Costco and IKEA internationally. They do not want a black eye from supporting the wrong things. So these were on not just the big box retail stores, but also distribution centers. And that was a phenomenal vertical for a period of time. And then, of course, the Veterans Administration portfolio was similar to the Georgia Power projects in the sense that that was a Buy American Act procurement, but it was exempted by TAA. And in total, I mean, these were ground mounts, these are single axis trackers, these were carports, these are roof mounts, every type of installation you can imagine flung across the entire country. And that was a really nice portfolio to have under our belt.
Nice.
These individual ones, again, just to call it some highlights, I like Tranquility as an individual. This is one of the recurrent projects we had talked about, but 258 megawatts, that's a lot of solar panels covering a lot of area. And with a complicated enough deal structure with the commercial and tactical logistic elements that I was personally maintaining a Gantt chart month by month of everything that was needed through a 9-month period, and it ended up performing flawlessly. So that was fantastic. The Rio Tinto Stadium is in Utah. That is a professional soccer stadium. That's a open, not an enclosed stadium. So if you want a large PV system on a open stadium, there's not really much roof area. This is very, very small proportion roof mounted, and majority is carport structures, which is great,
Yeah.
of course, for shading vehicles when it's hot, covering from rain, and then Utah, you also have snow, protecting snow vehicles from snow. This is from the early days internationally. We've got Germany, we've got other parts of the world, and I think that last one is a nice way to tie up because these are recent years in Europe, but specifically the outline ones on the left and the right. The one on the left is a car wash building in the Netherlands, and there wasn't much available roof space if you look at that. So between the other roof obstacles and the parapet walls, they really needed maximum power density, but also maximum energy yield. They needed to produce the most kilowatt hours from that rooftop, and they got that with a REC heterojunction product. So the PAR was actually the predecessor of the RX. This was a 40 cell G12. These modules are not very large. Those are around 420 watts, but they were able to get almost 300 kW on that roof, which met their design considerations. And also in the Netherlands on the far right, this is a HJT product that was going on a agricultural application. There was a lot of ag applications in the very early days in Germany. And then in the US, we've seen sort of a early rush towards that in California specifically. But now as other states come online with viable incentive and interconnection programs, agriculture is just a tremendous vertical. And that it spans, of course, a lot of different operations. It could be a growing operation where they're predominantly pumping wells. It could be
Yeah.
a nut drying, could be a processing operation. But agriculture is really, really phenomenal application for PV.